Over 1 million people a day are flying every day, and nobody's checking on that the system is functioning properly.
FAA Aviation Inspector John Welsh says he and his colleagues haven't had a paycheck in weeks.
We're asking the government to put us back to work and start paying us again. It's putting a lot of stress on the family. Okay, we don't know when our next paycheck's coming, so we're paying attention to our money.
Clint Smith says he's found a good paying job installing cable as a contractor. But
in order to be an independent contractor, just as it sounds, I have to be an independent proprietor. And they require an EIN number.
Clint applied for his employer identification number on the IRS website, but received this message. And when he called the number as instructed,
live telephone assistance is not available at this time. Normal operations will resume as soon as possible.
Here I am looking for temporary work.
With a master's degree and a bachelor's from the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, he's overqualified to work here in a flooring warehouse.
I'm willing to do whatever it is that I can just to make ends meet, and I refuse to become a complete victim of this furlough.
Ken Nieves was furloughed from housing and urban development.
We don't want to get so far behind that we're just bleeding our savings, and that's where we're at right now.
More local news reports on the impact of the government shutdown on people across the country. Joining us now, former Republican Congressman Carlos Curbelo. And we are happy to announce that he is joining NBC News and MSNBC as a political contributor. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Mika.
Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. Going to talk about the government shutdown in a moment, but something that I've been wondering since the election. We followed your race especially closely. I'm just wondering, is there still room, do you believe, from everything that you've seen from your personal experiences in Donald Trump's Republican Party for a conservative, Jeb Bush-style Republican who is a traditional conservative, a traditional Republican? Is there still room for that person in Trump's GOP?
Joe, that's a good question, and the truth is I really don't know the answer to that. My priority is to make sure there is room, or to make that room, because I do believe that this country deserves a small government, free enterprise, conservative party, and every day we're farther and farther away from that. And certainly a lot of the Republicans got swept away in the blue wave that at least hit the House in 2018 were centrist Republicans that do believe in small government, that do believe in free enterprise, that don't want to build a party based on culture wars and some kind of racial identity. So I don't know if there's a future. I certainly hope there is, because this country does need and deserve, I think, two strong parties. We only have two, so both of them have to be able to compete to win a majority of the American people. And right now I see that my party, in that sense, is moving in the wrong direction.
We just showed a clip, a news clip of the effects of Donald Trump's government shutdown. You were there over the past several years when Republicans were in control of both houses, when the Wall Street Journal took a poll of every Republican in the House and the Senate, and less than 1 in 4 supported Donald Trump's wall. Why the government shutdown now if Republicans didn't want the wall the 2 years they were in power?
So here's what I'll say, Joe. There's certainly a lot of skepticism about this wall concept on the Republican side of the aisle. Of course, most of these members don't speak up. They only speak to each other privately. But having said that, I do think the best thing for all of us to do, all of us that want to see an end to this, and these stories are so important, because while maybe the average American goes on with life as normal while the government is shut down, certainly for these federal workers who serve the American people, this is very painful and very difficult. So these stories are important, but I think the way out is a grand bargain on immigration. This is the issue that's dividing this country. This is an issue that I think hurts our political discourse beyond immigration itself. It generates a lot of resentment in society, a lot of scapegoating. So I think the way out here here is a grand bargain, and that means that Republicans have to do what we kind of forced a lot of House Republicans to do last year through our discharge petition process on immigration. We got a majority, the majority on the record in support of the path to citizenship for 2 million dreamers in our country. Republicans, especially in the Senate, have to be prepared to vote for that. And sure, I think there has to be some give from Democrats on border security, not for this wall from sea to sea, because that's never going to happen and would be a massive waste of money, but certainly to reassure those Americans that do want to see more border security.
You touched on something, Congressman, a minute ago that I want to follow up on, because it's something we've heard too, and that's Republicans grumbling privately about the president, or rolling their eyes about the president in private, but in public going out and supporting him again and again, voting with him again and again. Now that you're out of Congress, what can you tell us about that dynamic, and help us understand why Republicans are afraid, many of them, to cross this president?
So the greatest fear for a lot of House Republicans, and I think this dynamic we see growing in the Democratic Party as well, is a primary challenge. No one wants to be primary. No one wants to be attacked from their own side. So that's why a lot of Republicans are reticent to speak out, because they believe that speaking out against the president or questioning the president means inviting a primary challenge. And this is kind of the problem with our politics. I think it has become a career for many members of Congress. And when you're serving, that's one thing. And sure, you'd like to continue serving. I certainly wanted to. But when you treat it as just another job or as a career, I think you're less willing to take risk to do the things that the nation needs for you to do. So that's why we get that dynamic where we have a lot of Republicans quietly, even Republican leaders, who lament some of the things the president says and does, but are unwilling to say so publicly.
Peggy, it's such an interesting dynamic. I remember Mark Sanford came on our show 2 mornings after he lost his primary in South Carolina, and we said, what's your advice to Republicans running in the fall? He said, don't cross Donald Trump. I spoke out against Donald Trump. I disagreed publicly with Donald Trump, and look where it got me. I lost. He said I wouldn't have changed it. I said what I believe, but it cost me my job.
Yeah, I think maybe Jeff Flake and others would have a sense of this. But let me ask, first of all, when you say the obvious play here, obvious, is trading enhanced, better border security for a DACA deal, just get it done. It could be done by both sides, but let me ask you about your observations. It seems to me part of the problem here, for all of our complaints about leadership, et cetera, they're just. But part of the problem is that the bases of both parties are fairly polarized. Am I wrong? I mean, I think Donald Trump's immigration position at this point is actually sort of moderate. It's like, give me 200 miles of border wall, but he doesn't say that when he talks to his base. He says wall, 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 and they go wall, wall, wall on the Democratic Party side. Nancy Pelosi says, yeah, I'll tell you what I'll give you. I'll give you $1 for your wall. And the Democrats go, yay, yay, yay. So aren't the people on the ground in America pretty polarized?
That's right. And the problem, to your point, Peggy, the rhetoric that the president uses makes it a lot harder for Democrats to come over and make a deal. Having said that, I'll tell you my personal experience. We filed a bill that was voted on the floor of the House. We forced Republican leadership to debate, to consider broad immigration reform. And that bill included not $5 billion, $25 billion for border security, path to citizenship for 2 million dreamers, and not a single Democrat voted for it. And I made some Democratic friends while I was in the House. Some of them came up to me and said, you know what? This is a pretty good deal, but politically, we can't support it. And that's the problem, that in our country, both parties, to differing degrees, are catering to their bases. And that broad majority, I believe, silent majority in the middle, is being left out, and the country is losing, and the institutions are being diminished. So this is a time of crisis in our country, and I hope that the colleagues that I left behind in the House don't take Mark Sanford's advice. I hope that in everything they do, they put the country first. no matter what happens come Election Day.
On that point, the idea of that middle being lost here, both sides going further and further to the right or to the left, one of the reasons why people believe that you lost your race was your stance on climate change, which is sort of out of step with a lot of your fellow Republicans. With those moderate Republicans partially swept away in that blue wave, how now can that issue, climate change, which, you know, as each day more evidence grows and more reports come out, is the #1 threat facing our planet right now, how do you move the ball on that at all, particularly with a White House that seems to want to hear none of it?
So, first of all, those that are saying that I lost because I have a position on climate change, which basically is that it's a real issue and that the government has a role in solving it. I think carbon pricing is the best solution. The idea that I lost because I held that position is nonsense, because climate change wasn't even an issue in my race. It was not in any ads. It was really not discussed. And I was the top performing Republican in my district, so I outperformed the candidate for governor and for Senate. Yes, it's going to be harder to get some consensus, at least on the House, on climate change because a lot of these Republicans like me lost their election. However, I will tell you that looking back just 3-4 years, there's been great growth on the Republican side of the aisle on this issue. We had over 40 Republicans sign on to the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus. Basically means they recognize the issue, they acknowledge that there's a role for government. That's a long ways from where we were just a few years ago, where no Republican was even willing to acknowledge the term climate change. So I think we're moving in the right direction, even though there's a small setback here as a lot of Republicans got swept away. But as this issue becomes real and evident at the local level, like it is in South Florida, we get tidal flooding, sea level rise. It's real. As this becomes a local issue in different parts of the country, we're going to see more and more Republicans come to the table with some pragmatic solutions. I think carbon pricing is important, and I also think that if we invest in adaptation, coastal infrastructure, that could certainly help as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Congressman. It's great to have you here. And the Congressman has joined a board that is of conservatives that actually is seeking solutions for climate change. I do want to also just say, because I've known Mark Sanford for so long, Willie's exactly right. He came on and said that. And as Willie said, he also told us he wouldn't change a thing. You know, also, though, Mika, Mark Sanford, the reason why he said he did what he did was he said after the campaign, he wanted to be able to look his boys in the eye and tell them that he did what he thought he was right. And he thought he did what was right in Washington. And you know what? He was able to do that, and I've spoken to him a good bit since, and he's still glad that he made that decision. He wouldn't change a thing.
Well, former Congressman Carlos Curbelo, and now an NBC News and MSNBC political contributor. Thank you very much, and welcome aboard.
Thank you, Mika.
Still ahead, we'll talk to the co-chairs of the Problem Solvers Caucus, who met with President Trump yesterday to discuss the shutdown. Morning Joe is coming right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.